Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Bharadari Yasoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Bharadari Yasoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Bharadari Yasoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Kishore Kishori ki jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani ki jai, Gonitai ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Good morning. We're reading from Canto 10, a new chapter 87, and it's text 1. The person who does the service, I believe, is away, so this is yesterday's verse, but we will be referencing it so it can remain there. I hope you have your phones. No? So you won't be able to chant the verse with me then. You can use this book, and you can pass it back to me, because I have it on the computer as well. It's text 1. Can you see? Because the light has gone out there. Okay. So I'm going to be reading the introduction to the chapter 87, and then we'll proceed to the verse. So this chapter presents the prayers by the personified Vedas, glorifying the personal and impersonal aspects of Lord Narayan. King Parikshit asked Srila Sukadeva Goswami how the Vedas can directly refer to the supreme absolute truth, Brahman, since the Vedas deal with the material realm governed by the three modes of material nature, and Brahman is completely transcendental to these modes. In reply, Sukadeva Goswami described an ancient encounter between Sri Narayan Rishi and Narada Muni at Badarik Ashram. Traveling to that sacred hermitage, Narada found the Lord surrounded by exalted residents of the nearby village of Kalapa. After bowing down to Narayan Rishi and his associates, Narada submitted the same question. To him. In reply, Narayan Rishi related an account of how this very question had been discussed long ago among the great sages living on Janaloka. Once these sages, feeling inquisitive about the nature of the absolute truth, chose Sananda Kumar to speak on the subject. Sananda told them how the numerous personified Vedas, appearing as the first emanations from the breathing of Lord Narayan, recited prayers for his glorification just before the creation. Sanandana then proceeded to recite these elaborate prayers. The residents of Janaloka were perfectly satisfied upon hearing Sanandana's recite the prayers of the personified Vedas, which enlightened them about the nature of the supreme absolute truth. And they honored Sanandana with their worship. Narada Muni was equally satisfied to hear this account from Sri Narayan Rishi. Thus Narada offered his obeisances to the Lord and then went to see his disciple Vedavyas, to whom he explained everything he had heard. So now we're going to proceed to text 1. Shri Parikshit Uvacha Brahman Brahmani Anirdesye Nirgune Guna Vritaya Katam Charanti Shrutaya Shakshat Sad Asata Pare Shri Parikshit Uvacha Brahman Brahmani Anirdesye Nirgune Guna Vritaya Katam Charanti Shrutaya Shakshat Sad Asata Pare Shri Parikshit Uvacha Brahman Brahmani Anirdesye Nirgune Guna Vritaya Katam Charanti Shrutaya Shakshat Sad Asata Pare. Please chant. Shri Parikshit Uvacha Brahman Brahmani Deshe Nevritmani Vitaya Chatam Charanti Shrutaya Shakshat Sad Asata Pare Shri Parikshit Uvacha Brahman Brahmani Anirdeshye Nirgune Guna Vritaya Katam Charanti Shrutaya Shakshat Sad Asata Pare Shri Parikshit Uvacha Brahman Brahmani Anirdesye Nirguna Guna Vritaya Katam Charanti Shrutaya Shakshat Sad Asata Pare. Okay, all right. No, she's got a telephone. It's 87.10.87.1. Do you want me to wait? All right. So the word for word, Shri Parikshit Uvacha. Shri Parikshit said, Brahman, O Brahmana, Sukadeva, Brahmani, in the absolute truth, Anirdeshye, which cannot be described in words, Nirgune, which has no qualities, Guna, the qualities of material nature, Vritaya, whose scope of action, Katam, how, Charanti, function, by referring, Shrutaya, the Vedas, Shakshat, directly, Sat, to material substance, Asata, and its subtle causes, Pare, in that which is transcendental. And the translation for text 1, and this is a BBT translation and purport, Sri Parikshit said, O Brahmana, how can the Vedas directly describe the supreme absolute truth who cannot be described in words? The Vedas are limited to describing the qualities of material nature, but the Supreme is devoid of these qualities, being transcendental to all material manifestations and their causes. And the purport, and it's several pages, but it goes fairly fast because it's a number of verses in their translation. Before beginning his commentary on this chapter, Srila Sridhar Swami prays, Vag Isha Yasya Vadana, Lakshmi Yasya Cha Bakshasi, Yasyaste Hirdaye Samvit, Tam Nishimham Aham Bhaje. So this is Sridhar Swami. I worship Lord Nrsimha, within whose mouth reside the great masters of eloquence, upon whose chest resides the goddess of fortune, and within whose heart resides the divine potency of consciousness. Sampradaya Vishuddhi Artam Sviya Nirbandha Jamkrita Shruti Stuti Inimita Vyakayam Charishyam Yata Mat. A desiring to purify my sampradaya and being bound by duty. Sorry, my computer jumped. I will briefly comment on the prayers of the personified Vedas to the best of my realization. Srimad Bhagavatam Purva Sarata Sanishvevitam Mayatud Upasprishtam Uchistam Upachiyate. Inasmuch as Srimad Bhagavatam has already been perfectly honored by my predecessors' explanations, I can only gather together the remnants of what they have honored. This precedes Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, who offers his own invocation. Mama Rama Varik Bhavam Ratnani Apari Chinvata Asantu Shanto Jiren Nesvasvanta Vinodakrit. The saintly devotees may laugh at me for becoming a jewel merchant, though I know nothing about precious jewels, but I feel no shame, for at least I may entertain them. Very different approach. Namashti Vaidushi Api Napi Bhakti Virakti Rakti Natata Pilolyat Sudurgamad eva bhavami veda stuti artha chintamani ashikritnu. Though I have no wisdom, devotion, or detachment, I am still greedy to take the philosopher's stone of the Vedas prayers from the fortress in which it is being kept. Mam nichatayam aviveka vayu pravartate pratayitum balakchet likami yata swami sanatana shri krishnangri ba shamba kritavatamba. If the wind of indiscretion, my failure to acknowledge my lowly position, threatens to knock me down, then while writing this commentary, I must hold on to the effulgent pillars of the feet of Sridhar Swami, Sanatan Goswami, and Lord Sri Krishna. Pranamya Shri Gurum Bhuya Shri Krishnam Kartunarnavam Lokanatam Jagachakshu Shri Shukam Tam Upashraye. Repeatedly bowing down to my divine spiritual master and to Lord Sri Krishna, the ocean of mercy, I take shelter of Sri Sukadev Goswami, the protector of the world and its universal eye. At the end of the preceding chapter, Sukadev Goswami told Parikshit Maharaj, and that was the verse you did yesterday that's on the board, so it's been referenced again. Evam sva bhaktyo rajan bhagavan bhakte bhaktmam ushidvadisya sanmargam punadvara vatim agat. Thus, O King, the personality of Godhead, who is the devotee of his own devotees, stayed for some time with his two great devotees, teaching them how perfect saints behave. Then he returned to Dwarka. Close quote. In this verse, the word Sanmargam can be understood in at least three ways. In the first, Sat is taken to mean, quote, devotee of the Supreme Lord, close quote, and thus Sanmargam means means, quote, the path of Bhakti Yoga, devotional service, close quote. In the second, with Sat meaning, open quote, a seeker of transcendental knowledge, close quote, Sanmargam means, quote, the philosophical path of knowledge, close quote, which has impersonal Brahman as its object. And in the third, with Sat referring to the transcendental sound of the Vedas, Sanmangam means the, quote, the process of following Vedic injunctions, close quote. Both the second and the third of these interpretations of Sanmargam lead to the question of how the Vedas can describe the absolute truth. Srila Sridhar Swami elaborately analyzes this problem in terms of the traditional discipline of Sanskrit poetics. We should consider that words have three kinds of expressive capacities called Shabda Vrittis. These are the different ways a word refers to its meaning, distinguished as Mukhya Vritti, Lakshana Vritti, and Gona Vritti. The Shabdavriti, termed Mukhya, is the primary literal meaning of a word. This is also known as Abhidha, a word's open quote, denotation, close quote, or dictionary meaning. Mukhya Vritti is further divided into two subcategories, namely Rudhi and Yoga. A primary meaning is called Rudhi when it is based on conventional usage, and Yoga when it is derived from another word's meanings for regular etymological rules. For example, the word go, cow, is an example of Rudhi since its relation with its literal meaning is purely conventional. The denotation of the word pachaka, which means chef, on the other hand, is a yoga vritti through the word's derivation from the root pak, which means to cook, by addition of the agent suffix ka. Besides its mukhya vritti or primary meaning, a word can also be used in a secondary metaphorical sense. This usage is called lakshana. The rule is that a word should not be understood metaphorically. If its mukhya vritti makes sense in the given context, only after the mukhya vritti fails to convey a word's meaning may lakshana vritti be justifiably presumed. The function of lakshana is technically explained in the Kavya Shastras as an extended reference, pointing to something in some way related to the object of the literal meaning. Thus, the phrase Gangayam Gosha literally means the cowherd village of the Ganges. In the Ganges. But that idea is absurd. So here, Gangayam should rather be understood by its lakshana, meaning its metaphorical meaning, to mean on the bank of the Ganges. So the bank being something related to the river. Gauravriti is a special kind of lakshana where the meaning is extended to some idea of similarity. For example, in the statement, Shrinha Devavadata, Devavadata is a lion. Heroic Devadatta is metaphorically called a lion because of his lion-like qualities. In contrast, the example of the general kind of lakshana, namely Gangayam Gosha, involves a relationship not of similarity but of location. In the first verse of the 87th chapter, which is the one we're doing today, Parikshit Maharaj expresses doubt as to how the words of the Vedas can refer to the absolute truth by any of the valid kinds of Shabdavriti. He asks, Katam Shakshat Charanti, how can the Vedas directly describe Brahman by Ruda Mukhya Vritti, literal meaning based on convention? After all, the absolute is anirudesya, inaccessible to designation. And how can the Vedas even describe Brahman by Guna Vritti, metaphor based on similar qualities? The Vedas are Guna Vritaya, full of qualitative descriptions, but Brahman is Nirguna without qualities. Obviously, a metaphor based on similar qualities cannot apply in the case of something that has no qualities. Furthermore, Parikshit Maharaj points out that Brahman is Sad Asata Param, beyond all causes and effects, having no connection with any manifest existence, subtle or gross. The absolute cannot be expressed by either yoga vritti, a meaning derived etymologically, or lakshana metaphor, since both require some relationship of Brahman to other entities. Thus, King Parikshit is puzzled as to how the words of the Vedas can directly describe the absolute truth. It's quite a purport, isn't it? Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shlakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swam Rupam Kadamayam Tadati Swapadanti Kam Vandeham Shri Guru Yuta Padakamlam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Agutam Vitam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Shri Radha Krishna Padansa Gana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bando Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tata Kanchana Gourangi Radha Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnebhyo Namo Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimataram Padaswami Tinamine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimata Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tinamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. You can keep it if you want to reference anything because I have it on the computer, so it may help you also when it comes to question time and something that's referred to. So it's perfectly fine if you have it. So, in looking at this particular verse, I'm going to be referencing Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and in this purport, we read how he's actually paying obeisances before beginning and embarking on these words from the personified Vedas. So this particular verse, he's particularly referencing the verse that was covered yesterday, 10.86.59, which is the one that was on the board and that you read yesterday. So that verse reads as follows: Evam sva bhaktyo rajan bhagavan bhakta bhaktanam usidvadisya sanmargam punar dvaravatim agni. And the translation for that verse: O king, the personality of Godhead, who's devoted to his devotees, stayed for some time with his two great devotees, Shrutadeva and Bahulashva, teaching them the behavior of perfect saints. Then the Lord returned to Dwarka. So the reason that Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is referring to this verse from yesterday is that he breaks down the meaning of the word Satmargam, and we read that for Sanmargam, and we read it in the purport. So Sat is of pure saints, and Margam is the path to show that there are three ways of understanding the term or the word. So that was the actual translation of Sanmargam, which you read yesterday. So the first way is to understand Sat as meaning devotee of the Supreme Lord. And thus, San Margam means the path of Bhakti Yoga, because Margam was the three ways of understanding, and so the path of Bhakti Yoga or devotional service. The second way to understand the word is to understand Sat as a speaker of transcendental knowledge. So one's a speaker, one is devotee of the Supreme Lord. And so then if you understand that this is a speaker of transcendental knowledge, the second meaning for that San or Sat, then Sanmargam means the path of Jnana Yoga. If you just say the speaker, which has an impersonal Brahman as its object. And then there's a third way to understand this Sanmargam. So Sat could be referring to the transcendental sound of the Vedas. So one is the Supreme Lord, one is actually just saying the speaker, and then the third one is the transcendental sound of the Vedas. So if you take the third meaning, it's just the transcendental sound of the Vedas, Sat, then Sanmargam means the process of following Vedic injunctions, because you're referring to the Vedas. So three different ways you could actually translate this Sanmargam. So Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he begins by looking at this verse from yesterday before he launches into the verse of today. So it's because of the second and third of these interpretations. So remember, the second interpretation for Satmargam, the second one is a speaker of the Vedas. So therefore you could be referring to somebody who has knowledge of the Vedas, just Jnana. And the third meaning was the transcendental sound of the Vedas, in which case you could be referring to the particular knowledge in the Vedas. Or following the Vedic injunctions. So it's because of the second and third of these interpretations of Sanmargam that leads King Parikshit's question of how the Vedas can describe the absolute truth. So it's just because he noted that particular point. So see what an extraordinary, highly intelligent devotee King Parikshit is. So the question raised by Maharaj Parikshit is the following. So this is the question he raises. O Brahmana, how can the Vedas directly describe the supreme absolute truth who cannot be described in words? So see, very interesting question. So because he's considering, if you talk about the path of devotional service, or you just talk about that it's the path of acquiring knowledge, or it's the Vedas, following Vedic injunctions, then he's thinking more clearly about this, and he's thinking, how can the Vedas directly describe the supreme absolute truth who cannot be described in words? So very, very intelligent question. So this difficulty to understand describes the supreme absolute truth is explained by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. And this is how Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur handles it. And it's so intelligent and so logical, but one needs the help of the Acharya to even tackle this extraordinary question asked by Maharaj Parikshit. So this is how Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains it. He says, Brahman cannot be defined. So you can't define Brahman. So the word that is used is Antyodesha, which we read, and it was translated as which cannot be described in words. So Brahman cannot be described in words. So you won't see it there because it's today's verse. You'd have to look in the book. So it's the second line of the text of today, the Antyodesha. So Brahman cannot be defined. And the translation we read for that word, Antyodesha, was it cannot be described in words. And because it has no class, and this is the reason Brahman cannot be described in words, the word has no class, substance, quality, or action. So the Sanskrit for those particular components, jati, davya, guna, and kriya. No class, no substance, no quality, no action. So that's the particular reason that you can't describe Brahman in words. So therefore, how can the Vedas indicate Brahman? That's the question, by direct meaning. If you're just hearing that the word Brahman doesn't have class, substance, quality, or action, then how can the Vedas indicate Brahman by direct meaning? That's the question. So shakshat is the word for direct meaning. So from the BBT purport that we read today, the literal meaning of the word, the avidya, the literal meaning of the word and its conventional usage, and the word's derivation from, and there's also the word's derivation from another meaning. So there's those two kind of ways, like a regular word. And if you remember from the text, there was the literal cow, go, so that's, literal meaning. And there's the conventional usage of the words, and then there's words that are derived from another meaning. So if you remember from the purport, the example was given of the word for chef, and that word has at its root to cook. So it was understood, the person who cooks. Um, Now, the meaning or usage is as follows, and this is what Srila Prabhupada teaches in Bhagavad Gita. The impersonal or pervasive aspect of the Supreme Brahman may also be used to mean the Mahatattva or total material substance. So see, these are all the definitions that are given by Brahman. And if you look in the back of Bhagavad Gita, where there's like a kind of dictionary definition of each of the words, you'll find this. So one is Brahman is referred to as the impersonal or pervasive aspect of the Supreme Brahman. Another meaning is the Mahatattva or total material substance. And a third term or third meaning that's given to the term Brahman refers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And a fourth one is the individual soul. So all of these, Brahman has all these meanings that are given. If one looks at dictionary definitions, so to speak, at the back of the Bhagavad Gita. So Krishna himself gives a description, and this is Krishna's description, because we're looking at this word Brahman, because this is the problem that Maharaj Parikshit is having. So Krishna says this: I shall now explain the knowledge, knowing which you will taste the eternal Brahman, the spirit, beginningless and subordinate to me, which lies beyond the cause and effect of this material world. So that's Bhagavad Gita 13:14. So it would appear from Lord Krishna's giving the meaning of Brahman that it refers to spirit, which in fact gives it quality, because spirit has quality. So we're hearing how the word Brahman doesn't seem to have quality, but according to Lord Krishna's definition, where he says it lies beyond cause and effect of this material world, it's beginningless, it's subordinate to me, but he says Brahman, the spirit. So spirit is, we're getting some idea of why this problem is there, that, you can't give qualities, because it's spirit. Brahman refers to spirit. That's Krishna's definition. So it would appear that Lord Krishna is giving the meaning of Brahman as spirit, which, as I repeat, it does give Brahman quality. Srila Prabhupada gives a further quality for Brahman. And this is what he says, and this is all in the purport of Bhagavad Gita 13:14. He says, it allows one to experience the nectar of life, knowing the soul and the super soul. So this is all in relation to Krishna's definition of Brahman as spirit. It does have quality. Spirit has quality. And another thing about Brahman, the quality that's there, is that it allows one to experience the nectar of life. So life has suddenly nectar, life, just by experiencing Brahman or spirit. And this is because one comes to understand that there's the existence of the soul and super soul. And we read that this is very breakdown, but this is this particular verse today, so I have to go through it just by duty. So just stay tuned. It's not that complicated if one just pays attention and thinks carefully. Oh, it's falling down. Sorry, you're not hearing me? Thank you. Okay. I think we have it. If a problem comes, I'll slide it all the way there and do it again and get up. Okay. Thank you. All right. Okay, back to where the thinking was. So what in fact is happening, one is by saying that the nectar of life is being given by experiencing Brahman, means that one is coming to know the existence of the soul and the super soul. And so one can infer that Srila Prabhupada is using this word Brahman, referring to both individual soul and the personality of Godhead as super soul. We can understand that just from reading the purport. So that soul is beginningless. So it's correct. There's this problem that's been wrestled with here. How do you give it substance? It doesn't seem to have substance, doesn't seem to have qualities. But we're already getting an idea that actually spirit does have quality. And the next part is, look, the soul doesn't have a beginning. It's beginningless because there's no specific date at which the jiva was born. I mean, we could say the body is born, but there's no specific date at which the soul was born. And it still is not possible, Srila Prabhupada notes, to trace the history of the jivatmas manifesting from the Supreme Lord. We don't know the history at which point our particular soul manifested from the Supreme Lord. So you could say that Brahman is analyzed by Srila Prabhupada from this description of Lord Krishna, such that it does have a class. And why it has a class is that when Brahman, the word, is applied to the living entity, it is to be understood that he is Vijnana Brahma, so he's getting knowledge of the Supreme Brahman, as opposed to Ananda Brahma, which Ananda Brahma is the Supreme Brahman. So there is class, there's a difference, different categories. So a distinction is made by Srila Prabhupada between the two classes of the word Brahman. So you can see, just by looking more closely, you can come to understand that you can't say that Brahman does not have class, Brahman has no qualities. It's a fact, but then when you analyze spirit, Krishna's definition, and looking at Srila Prabhupada's commentary, you come to understand that actually it's spirit does have quality. Spirit does have class. There's distinction made between the individual soul and the supreme soul. And Srila Vishwanath continues, Brahman is beyond qualities. So that word that's used is nirvana. So the definition of Lord Krishna, that Brahman is beyond material qualities, since it's spirit, it's beyond substance, meaning it's sat. So it's beyond substance such as earth, and beyond class, jati, since that is present in substance, action, and quality. So it's a different kind of concept that we are looking at. It's not the quality of earth, something material. And that's why that particular statement, that it doesn't appear to have substance, doesn't appear to have action, doesn't appear to have quality. So from the examination that I was doing from Lord Krishna's definition of Brahman being spirit, it did have spiritual quality of giving the nectar of life. So all of which is in agreement with Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti, who's talking of Brahman being beyond material qualities. So it doesn't have the quality of earth because it's not of a material quality. It's spirit. It's beyond material action because it's not a material action to get a realization of the existence of the soul and of the super soul. It's not a material action to experience the ecstatic feelings that come from that understanding and having that knowledge, that nectar that comes. And it is beyond action, material action, and it's beyond material quality. So that's the qualification. So the question being raised by Maharaj Parikshit is, how can the Vedas, whose existence depends on class, substance, and actions, or in other words, the aspects of quality, guna vrita, deal with this Brahman, which is beyond class, object, quality, and action? So it's an interesting question. If you are thinking of something that's material in a sense, I mean, it's a subtle form because when you're talking about words, it's representation of, but it's still considered, a word is considered sort of material. So it's asking, how can the Vedas speak of Brahman? Because it doesn't have these particular material qualities. So connected to this important topic is the understanding of transcendental subject matter. So, because that's what we're understanding from these words. It's not we're getting material understanding. The cow is brown and the cow produces milk. It's not material understanding. Rather, the topic is one of understanding transcendental subject matter. So, this is what Srila Vishwanath says. Oh no, I'm going to read something that Srila Prabhupada explains about this verse. So listen how simply he puts it. Since Vedic knowledge generally deals with the subject matter of the three qualities of the material world, how then can it approach the subject matter of transcendence, which is beyond the approach of the three material modes? Since the mind is material and the vibration of words is material, sound, how can the Vedic knowledge expressed by material sound, the thoughts of the material mind, approach transcendence? It's a very interesting question. So that's how Srila Prabhupada very simply puts across the same idea. So Srila Prabhupada continues with explaining the question asked by Maharaj Parikshit, and he gives some criteria that need to be met. So the criteria that needs to be met. Description of a subject matter necessitates describing the source of its emanation. Where did it come from? The qualities of that subject and its activities. So that's the criteria that need to be met if you're going to describe something. Where did it come from? What are its qualities? And what are its activities? So such descriptions can be possible only by thinking with the material mind and by vibrating material words, because that's what we have access to. We've got a material mind and we use material words. So he continues using logic. This is Srila Prabhupada. Brahman, or the absolute truth, has no material qualities, but our power of speaking does not go beyond the material qualities. So it seems like we're in a quandary here. What's going to happen? So then, how can Brahman, the absolute truth, be described by your words? So I do not see how it's possible to understand transcendence from such expression of material sound. This is Srila Prabhupada talking. There is a statement made by Lord Krishna, however, that is an answer to Arjuna's question. And this is Bhagavad Gita 14:26, where he says this: what is the means for attaining to the supreme position? So, one who engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once transcends the modes of material nature and then comes to the level of Brahman. So, this is the way of going past that problem of being caught in a corner. You're dealing with material words, material sound. So you want to come to a transcendental position where you're above the material component. So the answer that's given is one who engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once transcends the modes of material nature. Then even the words that are coming out, even the material mind is no longer material. The words are no longer material. One comes to the level of Brahman or spirit. So that's what happens. And Srila Prabhupada explains, the Lord says that his nature is eternal, blissful, and full of knowledge. And the living entities are part and parcel of the Supreme, just as gold particles are part of a gold mine. Thus, the living entity in his spiritual position is as good as gold, as good as Krishna, in quality. If one is not situated in the same transcendental position with the Lord, one cannot serve the Lord. Thus, the qualification, as Srila Prabhupada says, is to become Brahman, or freed from all material contamination. So that's what changes the whole picture. It frees one from the material contamination. It frees one from the material modes. Therefore, even the words change. Even one's material mind changes. It becomes spiritualized, spirit, Brahman. So this means one must qualitatively become one with Brahman, meaning spiritualized. And by attainment of Brahman, one does not lose his eternal Brahman identity as an individual soul. That's the other extraordinary part. So you become spiritualized, but you still remain an individual soul. So for Maharaj Parikshit, his inquiry was to ascertain whether the Vedas describe the absolute truth as personal or impersonal. So from our understanding here, just by doing the small analysis, clearly it's actually on a personal level, because there's always that distinction between soul and supersoul. So becoming transcendental, becoming spiritualized, becoming Brahman, so to speak, spirit, still means that one's in relationship with the Supreme Soul. So it's of a very personal nature, and this is how the Vedas describe it. So this was an attempt, a very short attempt, to look at this complex question. So if there's some question that comes to mind, or something else that can further our discussion, please feel free. There's another one. If you go up to the computer, on the left of the computer, there's 3 microphones, and you just turn it on. And if the light has come on, it means it's a functional microphone.
I was wondering, like when I read like scriptures, and but I don't have this, but I'm not situated in, in Brahman. I'm not situated in myself. I have material like situation. Um, I was wondering how it is that I'm still able to understand, or get some glimpse, like how is it that a little is able to come through, and what is like what is, why is it not like all or nothing with the the Brahman? Why is there like gaps, it seems like, or is that not even like, am I not even seeing that right?
Oh, it's a very nice question, because you're looking from a personal level, and you're thinking, well, okay, you're reading the scriptures, the Vedic injunctions, um, and it seems like there's a gap, and you understanding, okay, I may not be fully situated in spirit or Brahman, so therefore I'm still very much aware of my material situation, even when I'm studying or approaching the Vedas. So that's the particular quandary that's there, and Maharaj Parikshit is seeing it. One does have a material mind. One does have material senses. So there's already patterns existing in the mind that are kind of learned patterns that, maybe coming from many lifetimes, this lifetime. Even if one analyzes a little bit, one can see that some learning happened based on how one's parents dealt with one. So one will be sensitive in particular ways, or one will be angered in particular ways. And it's already because there's patterns in the mind. If one looks at behavioral theory, psychological behavioral theory, American pragmatism, you see that some, let's say, early experiments with B.F. Skinner, a dog learns that a bell sounds, and then some food will be given. And then after a while, the dog just hears a bell, immediately salivates because he knows food is coming. So he's learned a pattern. The bell is associated with food. So we learn all those kind of things as well. So when one is approaching the Vedas, so spiritual subject matter, one's coming with one's material mind, so all the learned patterns. And it's quite complex in many ways. So one is looking with a material view based on these patterns. So that material mind is gradually getting dissolved because one is utilizing one's material senses, just like standing and using one's body to dance in front of Lord Krishna, saying the Maha Mantra. So you're utilizing your material sense, your power of speech, your eyes, your sense of hearing. And when you're looking at the Vedas, your processing capacity. So the mind is now getting spiritualized. So those patterns start to get exposed over some time, and those material patterns, those learned patterns in the mind, they get exposed, and one gets a chance to go past them. Because by virtue of the spiritualization of the senses and of spiritualizing the mind, and the relationship with the Supreme Lord is actually giving, because of one's effort, there's mercy that's coming that's actually allowing for the intelligence to work better. So one can then start to discriminate what's matter and what's spirit. And so it's a gradual process of spiritualization and a gradual process of being able to see the Vedas and for the intelligence to start working, that one can actually comprehend more broadly, go past all those existing patterns in the mind that kind of act as a kind of veil through which one is seen, which is what you're expressing, the an awareness that one is not seeing everything. So it's quite extraordinary, this spiritualization process, because it gets more and more subtle, and the intelligence gets more and more refined, and the discernment gets sharper and sharper. So, when you read commentaries by the acharyas, it's like a highly refined, spiritualized intelligence. So when one just reads Maharaj Parikshit's question, it seems like such a quandary. How is it that it actually all takes place? And then you slowly go into looking at the analyzing, how a material, something material always has to have qualities. It has to have class. It has to have substance. It has to have an origin. And then you start looking from the spiritual perspective, how spirit actually does have quality. It does have sound. And it does have an origin. So it's rather extraordinary, the process. So that was a long answer, but nice question. The microphone, there's a question coming from our Pujari.
Nice class, Krishnarcana. And one thing that, in reference to the question, and also to add to your answer, is the importance of that we have of the acharyas to be able to have entrance to a proper understanding. Otherwise, it's an impossibility. And one of the things that you can appreciate, especially in this case of Maharaj Parikshit, that he's a Mahabhagavat devotee. He's a pure devotee with perfect knowledge. And for him to ask a question is sort of also a bit puzzling, because he had perfect understanding. Both him and Sukadeva Goswami have perfect understanding. Now, one of the things that you hear throughout the whole Bhagavatam narration and the whole pastime, especially of Maharaj Parikshit, is that he is asking those questions to benefit and to help to establish a proper understanding to all those sages that are there that represent, many of them represent the different schools of philosophy, and most of them have the misconceptions or the incomplete understanding of the absolute truth, meaning that many of them were in the level of Brahman or impersonal. So, for their benefit, the Maharaj Parikshit will ask these questions, and Sukadev, they all basically a little bit on cahoots between Maharaj Parikshit and Srila Sukadev Goswami to establish these principles, uh, this higher understanding of the absolute truth, which is the Bhagavan understanding. And that's the whole thing of the Srimad Bhagavatam, is to establish the Bhagavad Dharma, the highest understanding of the absolute truth. And it's quite something that is a recurring theme, even from Lord in the narrations. Lord, the conversations between the Supreme Lord and his devotee is always questioning them. Why are you saying that? When they offer, prayers to the Lord, you are the Supreme, you are the, this and that, and say, why are you calling me Supreme? I'm not.
Yes.
So he's testing them in order, in one sense, to establish very clear the principle of Bhagavatam, which is something that you can appreciate, and it's something that, as sort of presented very nicely throughout, the analysis of the explanation of our acharyas, how to answer to that question and establish, the principle of Bhagavatam.
Thank you. Yes, yes, that the interaction itself between Maharaj Parikshit and Sukadev Goswami is that they are conscious of their audience, and that the audience does include, and that was the very interesting thing in Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's beginning analysis and referencing the verse from yesterday, was that there's three paths. So it's particularly because Maharaj Parikshit was concerned about the two second paths, understanding of this. So the first one is, the path of devotional service, and the other one could be just the path of getting knowledge, and the fourth and the third one is just actually following Vedic injunctions. So it's because of that that he's asking, because there is the highest path, the path of spiritualization of everything. And that's only possible by that connection and proper personal understanding of the supreme absolute truth. Need the microphone because it's being broadcast.
Yeah, that is true, and in the gathering of sages with Maharaj Parikshit, they were the representatives of Karma Mimansa, who is the Supreme Lord is there's no such a thing as Supreme Lord. You just do your karma and you achieve the result. They're obliged, it's something that is, so karma is supreme in one sense, or karma kanda, that type of thing. So there were those representatives in there. So all of those elements were being addressed in the conversation between Sukadev Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit. And in one sense, the whole thing was about how to make sure that all these confusing and sort of, in one sense, philosophies that create obstacles in the proper understanding gets all corrected and established, especially for Kali Yuga, because the Bhagavatam becomes the source of shelter and knowledge for Bhagavad Dharma in Kali Yuga. So it's all very, very clearly established.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Subala Pujari has been also, this particular fact of knowing the audience was fantastically highlighted because he's been listening to the audio book of Srimad Bhagavatam by Krishna Dharma. And so he was delighted to hear the description of all the various schools of philosophy that were present during this particular question answer of Sukadev Goswami and Maharaj Pariksha. Jacqueline, there was somebody who was a bit ahead of you. I don't mean to be rude, and then you can go. This young man.
Oh, you wanted to speak? Oh,
you want?
Yes,
fine.
I did.
Okay, very good. He's very
there was a
gentlemanly.
part. There's that word, and there's an acoustic situation again, and I was trying to hear because we were kind of moving around a little bit. Is it Brahmani? Is that what you were saying?
Yes, Brahman
Okay,
is the word.
because I was trying to. Okay, and there were some aspects, or there was a list of some important, I guess you would say, aspects that Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, had mentioned that we should know. Can you remember those?
Yes. So the I was drawing from a verse in Bhagavad Gita, and what Srila Prabhupada was commenting was that, and his particular definition, going back to those definitions that you find at the back of Bhagavad Gita for what Brahman is, he's particularly taking it as Brahman refers to individual soul, it refers to supreme soul, supreme personality of Godhead. So connection with Brahman means that one is in that relationship of individual soul experiencing ecstatic feelings in relation to a supreme soul that's supremely blissful. So that was one of the very important things that Srila Prabhupada pointed out, that actually the spirit or Brahman gives one the nectar of life. So it makes life fully nectarian.
Is there Brahman and then Brahmate? I mean, there's a present and a
No,
an active state.
no.
Okay, so
It's eternally existent
right.
spirit, Brahman.
Okay, so you were mentioning that they don't necessarily have an explanation of when the original soul comes about, but as far as when the soul becomes a body or is partaking of a body, they can recollect that. So you're saying that there's nothing in the Vedic scriptures that says when the souls actually became or derived from Krishna.
Yes, correct. Okay. Correct.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, it's you can't. There's no record of when the individual soul came from the supreme Brahman or supreme spirit or supreme being. There's no record of that. So you can't trace it to. This is when the soul took birth or appeared from the supreme Brahman. There's no such record. But we can trace out our particular, in our lifetime, the birth date for our physical body in which the soul is residing was this and this date. So it's quite different because the soul is eternally existing and it's eternally a part and parcel of the supreme soul, supreme being.
So was this more so pertaining to the original soul, or in other words, regardless of if we know when the soul or souls, is it some knowledge that it wasn't one soul and they dispersed and they, how would I say, multiplied from the one soul, or was it a multitude of souls? Is that?
It's a multitude of souls because I came across a nice phrase, they get scattered over the earth. So yeah, it's a multitude of soul coming from the supreme being.
And this was universal, or was this throughout the universes or only in?
Throughout the universes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So
numerous universes.
I was thinking with the incarnations, I was thinking I was trying to say, well, maybe the first when there was Brahma, maybe it happened with Brahma. That would make sense when he was creating the earth. Do you think that might be kind of a clue? That would make sense. You can't have souls without a place for them to go. So I would think maybe it happened after Brahma created the universes or the planetary systems.
Yeah, it's how our mind is. That's why we have a material mind. The material mind, and that was highlighted so much, why it's such a problem. We're looking for the origin. There has to be the beginning point. There has to be an end point, because that's material. We know that something is born and something dies. There's a beginning point, there's an end point. It's hard to conceive of eternality. So that's what the problem is, but eternally existent.
So today, what would you say is the most important part of the lesson that we should absorb? Because we were kind of moving around a little bit.
Well, I can, I went through a sort of elaborate breakdown based on Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and looking at it more closely. But I would say that in summary, the question of Maharaj Parikshit of having this trouble that, how can you actually use material words to describe the Supreme Brahman, because Brahman, is not something that you can put into a material category, such as having qualities or having a class, etc. So the whole point was to actually show that actually Brahman can't be put into a material category. Brahman is spirit, and that was Lord Krishna's definition.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much for this nice class and your elaborate breakdown.
Oh, thank you so much for sitting through it.
Yeah, I like specifically you're talking about the three different interpretations of Satmargam. One is the path of devotional service, the path of Gyan, and knowledge from like the Vedic scriptures, or just like following the Vedas. I thought that was really interesting, and how you broke down how Maharaj Parikshit, because of these two interpretations, he was asking this question of how the Vedas can describe Brahman, even though it has no class, no substance, no quality, and no action. So I thought that was really intriguing. And then I guess from there you broke down Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur was talking about how there's still like different categories, or like Brahman still has a class. Maybe I could get some clarification. Was that Prabhupada that brought that in, or is it Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur? I guess maybe he was referencing Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Usually that's what he does too. But anyway, yeah, Brahman, having different sections of Brahman, Vigyan Brahman and Ananda Brahman, and then also how by coming to the platform of Brahman, then one can actually understand or describe Brahman. One question that I've been thinking about for the past few days is, this is like on the other side, how the soul, as Brahman as spirit, is able to actually come in contact with and enjoy matter, despite being transcendental, inherently transcendental and separate from matter. How is this possible for the spirit to actually, for the soul to actually interact with and enjoy the material world, despite being totally like different categories?
Yes. Well, the soul is, you could say, actually always aloof. It's just like the super soul residing within is watching the individual soul, and the individual soul gets subjected to the decisions made by the material mind and the material intelligence. So, but in actual fact, the soul is kind of just subjected. It's not exactly enjoying or suffering, not exactly, because it's of a different nature. What's actually being enjoyed is what the material mind is enjoying. So, and we're accustomed to working with our material mind. I mean, the particular characteristics of the material mind is that simply making a distinction between don't don't like. So if one is choosing the material mind chooses then it appears there's enjoyment. But then if one is actually uh, engaged in activities of the soul, meaning connecting with Krishna, then that the material mind likes, because one is actually receiving spiritual intelligence, or the spiritual intelligence is the intelligence of the soul is awakening. One may actually not agree with the mind and may choose to actually discard what the material mind thinks is enjoyable. So that enjoyment, or what one terms the enjoyment, is really the material mind's liking of certain things. And that can be completely changed when one actually embarks on cultivating spiritual senses, because then the material mind will still be wanting something, but because of spiritual intelligence, one may actually start to wipe away some of the habits that appear enjoyable to the material mind. So it's a different identity that's being cultivated through through spiritualizing one's senses, through taking in the Vedic teachings that are giving one spiritual intelligence. And of course, that intelligence is mercy coming from the Supreme Lord because of one's making that effort. So the material mind's ideas of enjoyment may change quite dramatically too.
Yeah, so as from what I understand, if I understood properly, you said that the soul is always aloof, but because it's covered over or in contact with the material mind, and it's the mind that's actually enjoying matter through accepting or rejecting, and that through engaging in spiritual life, then the mind is purified. That's one other question I have, is how exactly is the mind purified? I've heard that through engaging in spiritual activities, by engaging our senses, we produce like spiritual samskaras, and that like kind of like builds up. But what is like the actual process? How is the mind actually purified? Like how does one actually accrue like bhakti sukriti and like make spiritual advancement?
Um, well, the mind is the highest of the senses. So what the senses are taking as enjoyment, let's say what the eyes like to see, or what the ears like to hear, or what the tongue likes to taste or talk about, that is all kind of collected in the mind, where the mind sort of makes a very rudimentary kind of analysis of the particular information that's coming in. Oh, I like this, and then one gets a visual picture in the mind, or some impression in the mind based on that experience. So, for instance, just like the B.F. Skinner dog, something may trigger something in the mind. You know, one sees something, let's say one was attached to some particular item much earlier on in one's life, and one sees something connected to that item, and the feeling of pleasure comes. But that's because there's an impression that got formed in the mind. So now those impressions are sitting there, and they can be triggered and tapped into, stimulated, just like the dog was stimulated by the sound of the ballad associated with food. So in the same way, we can stimulate those impressions by something in the present. So your question is, how exactly is this spiritualization of the mind happening? So let's say there's emotions, because the mind has emotions, feelings, because as I said, it's very rudimentary. So there's emotional impressions. So as one's progressing through spiritualizing one's senses, performing activities that are of a spiritual nature, be it, active kirtan, be it associating with like-minded entities, engaging in spiritual activities, um, engaging in study of the Vedas, Vedic knowledge. The mind is also getting a new impression. So the new impression might be so the soul is experiencing that ecstasy, that happiness, because that was what Srila Prabhupada analyzes, that spiritualization takes the form of experiencing some sort of nectarian enjoyment. It's nectarian. It's so positive and happiness inducing, spiritual happiness inducing. So that also now is getting imprinted on the mind. So it's a much stronger kind of impression. This material pales in comparison, material happiness pales in comparison. So that builds up over time. So the old impressions don't carry such a weight. And where they do carry a weight, which is emotional, because of the intelligence that's supplied through the spiritual activities, one can actually step back and observe how the mind is functioning. So one can see more clearly, oh, I see, this and this and this and this triggers this kind of emotion, or these and these impressions have led to this kind of emotional state that I sometimes go through. So being able to take a step back allows one to analyze the functioning of the mind, and then one can actually intervene even and tell the mind, well, this is in the past, and this is not happening now. So, and sometimes one even has to go into that old space and say some things, because one was a younger person with different understandings. So sometimes one even has to go into the mind and actually speak to that younger person and say, well, no need to actually feel this sadness or whatever it is, if it's an emotional thing that's very strong in the mind, some impression. So that way, it's only possible through this spiritualization, these positive impressions coming in, that and the intelligence that starts becoming much stronger, that can actually manage the mind. One isn't being managed by the mind anymore. Now one's managing the mind.
So yeah, I think so. Then it's the process of favorable impressions or impressions associated with like positive emotions that creates like the gradual like spiritualization of the mind. So in that case, my question is, I've heard that the performance of bhakti yoga is all auspicious in all circumstances. But say an example, someone's really fried out, but like a practical example, someone's really fried out doing whatever service or like form of bhakti that they're engaged in. Then is that also a spiritualization of the mind if someone has a negative impression of while engaging in devotional service?
Negative impressions such as feeling fried out, you said?
Being like fried out. Like for
Fried
example,
out.
like say like someone's like a say like there's like a new devotee and like they're like attending the morning program, but they're just like totally like sleep deprived and they just like want to go back to sleep, and they're just like totally like fried, like they're just like totally like unhappy. Then in this case too, they also get purified because in this case they're getting like kind of like a negative impression of devotional service because they're feeling like unhappy.
Yeah, it's not necessarily the devotional service part that's creating unhappiness. It's needing to deal with the material mind. So the material mind, you know, may associate longer sleep as something it needs, and here it's getting disrupted because actually it's waking up at a much earlier time. It's like changing the rhythm of one's body. So there may be protests from the mind, and it doesn't mean that the person is fried out with devotional service. It's just that the mind is very strong in a particular way. And The person can be assisted because, you can point out logically, well, if you go to bed earlier, you'll have a good length of sleep that is equivalent to what you used to. So then you won't be compromised in that way. The mind can still be happy, but you can get up early and then take advantage of the hours that are in the mode of goodness to actually, chant the holy name, and so really allow the spiritualization process to go deeply. So it's just a matter of person may often need help with the intelligence part because we can't see so clearly. The mind is usually ruling. It's forcing one to act in particular ways.
Thanks, Margie. So I guess that devotional service is all auspicious, but sometimes due to our material conditioning, it appears to be painful.
Yes.
But then,
yes.
I guess from that aspect, then maybe that's like some like tangent. Then it's like important to situate someone in a situation where like they feel like materially like stable enough to actually like take advantage of devotional service.
That's
They're
right.
not like always like constantly like fried out, or like their mind's not always like in a state of like rejection. Otherwise, they might not be able to actually create positive bhakti samskaras.
Yes, that's a nice point. Yes, one has to be kind to oneself too, because you are dealing with a lot of impressions in the mind. So getting support, we probably should end. Usually, this class ends at about 20 to 9 after questions, so we've gone a little over time. I know the speaker yesterday goes long, but it's not that long. So maybe, Jacqueline, we can take it just offline, because I'll end the class now because it's been broadcast, and so nobody has to suffer with an excessively long class. So thank you very, very, very much for your very, very thoughtful and inquiring kind of mood. It's a very wonderful spiritualized quality to inquire into spiritual subject matter. We can speak together. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.